Hello again. This is Bob Passy with another edition of Democracy Rising America. Um, we're all in the midst of frustration and concern and watching what is happening to this country that we love as it kind of begins to dissolve in front of our eyes. And we watch what is happening in the rest of the world. Not that we're disconnected from it, because, which I think now there are 65 million refugees in the world, and a fair amount of them are because of wars that we have either initiated or are playing some part in. And in the meantime, we don't want to have anything to do with them. In other words, we're destroying their homes and sort of leaving them to their own fate as to how to survive. But we see not only war, but we see terrorism. And in one way, you might think about terrorism as the fact that this economic system that has ruled the world for several decades now, this free market capitalism, unfettered free market capitalism, is really not working for most of the people. And this is kind of one of the responses of people who, you could be just disempowered and say, well, what you do with me, whatever you want. But if you're really frustrated and you're a human being and you want to say, well, I have to do something, whatever it is, I have to let them know that this is not working very well, then on the spectrum of things, not the best choice, but on the spectrum of things, you have terrorism. Remember that this is not totally unknown to us. The American Revolution, from the English point of view, was terrorism. So we understand some of that. Anyway, and not to get distracted by that too much, and the key is about distraction. It's about how do we respond? How do we respond in ways that are more than just hand-wringing or agonizing over things, or making judgments about that's wrong, or calling names, or hitting, or getting into the fight that is pretty much unproductive. So part of today I'm going to talk about what we can do, what we can actually do, what are some of the small things that we can do. And of course, one of them is to go on living your life as an example of what a human being should be. I mean, a real human being, not a human being that is driven by competition and getting ahead, but the real human being, the human being you are with the people you love and the people you care about in your ordinary daily life, and the civility that's a part of that. But to continue to provide an example of rising above some of this mess and continuing to be a human being, believing in the human spirit, believing that that life is sacred, and that everybody is and everything is a part of that life, and we're not exactly in a position to decide who clearly are the good guys and the bad guys, and we have enough judgment to know that in most cases we can deal in a civil and a decent way with almost everybody. And once we get to know them, we understand that they are in a lot of ways dealing with the same issues that we are dealing with. I would say that most people, certainly in the United States, but I think all over the world, nobody really expects to, well, not many of them anyway, expect to get rich and famous. They really want to just have a way to have a job, make enough money to have a decent living for themselves and their family, and to be able to have the basic requirements of food and shelter, and in an industrialized country like us to have the potential of getting an education, health care, being able to retire. That's not a lot to ask in this society that is based on an economy that's just dynamite. it's just that all the money is going to a very few, and it's not being shared the way it used to be or should be. So, it isn't like everybody's scrambling over the top of everybody else trying to become the next millionaire or billionaire. Most of the people, most of you, you don't have, I mean, you might have dreams, but you don't have any realistic expectations that you need anything more than sort of a basic, decent standard of living with a future that is sustainable and secure. You don't have to worry about going bankrupt at any moment because of health. So that's what mostly that's what people are looking for, in spite of what they try to tell you, that everybody's scrambling to try to take your money away or taking, that's really not true. So we're living in a kind of propaganda soup where they're trying to tell us that the world is not what our senses and our common sense is telling us that it is. That somehow this economic system that we're still struggling under is working, and it's not. It's been just devastating to most people. And it certainly is time for a change, and most people know that. And most people have tried to do, in a non-revolutionary way, tried to get that point across. But in some ways, the people with the money and the power would just as soon pull the whole thing down around their ears rather than change. So we have to not get into that fight exactly. So what can you do? Or what should you not do? What you can do is you can go on, as I said, living an exemplary life of a human being in a democratic society. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. That just means you have to show fairness and equality and decency and a willingness to share and a willingness to work together in a way that the democratic society has to function in order for it to work. You have to, you can be sure to support public things like public education, the mail service, any of the public functions. They're being attacked. They really want to privatize everything. So, I mean, it's our way of having a connection to our governance and our way of life. So you can be supportive of those things. Anything that you find that you passionately believe in that is a positive, democratic kind of response, by all means, spend your time and energy and perhaps your resources supporting those things, not to the exclusion of everything else, but go for it with those things. You can also show people, there's certain words that you can use. You can use the word democracy. It's almost gone out of style. Talk about what should a democracy look like. That changes the discussion to some degree. How do we save community? And I'm not talking about exclusive communities of Christians against Muslims or anything like that. How do you save a community in a town, for instance, or a city? How do you save a unifying community in the nation? If we think about it in that way, we will not get sidetracked by so many of these other things that seem to say that only violence and force are going to be able to, or to make sure, forcing everybody to be a certain way. So democracy, community, citizenship, if you talk about those things in the discussions, it will change the discussions. I'm not saying you're going to win all the discussions, it'll just change the discussions. They're not words that we tend to use anymore. And there are certain things you should not do, I think, if you don't want to get distracted. One is turn off the news once in a while. Don't get drawn into fights. In other words, rise above what they're trying to get you to do. Don't get so caught up in all the electronic information so that you lose track of what your humanity really is. And I guess that's really what I'm trying to say is spend your time on your humanity and not on the negative things. That's it for today. Bye now.